Everyone, we are now live.
All right, good morning, everyone. So this is a training that we've worked with OGC and also the Office of Inspector General to put together, primarily for us to go through, ethics training, sunshine training, et cetera, with our committee members, but felt that there are so many people that, can either be delegates to those people or just people that need to understand better the process from a sunshine perspective, that we extended it to whoever, usually participates in the awards committee meetings or could be a delegate going forward. So I want to thank both of your offices for putting this together, and they're going to run it. I just, want to thank everybody for their attendance, their interest in learning more about all of this, so that we can all stay compliant. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Lasikia, and I really do appreciate you guys doing this for the team.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. It's 11:04 a.m., so I think I can still say good morning to everybody. We are so excited to be here, to be working with the JEA procurement team. This is almost a part two training that we did a couple of months ago. But this training is really more geared at the procurement board itself. I think it was board member Tootin that had a question a couple of meetings ago about whether or not there were takeaways that you could apply with respect to other boards and commissions. And I absolutely think there will be takeaways when we get to the state statutes and the local ordinance code. You can certainly apply that. But for the first part of this, it's really going to be more geared towards the procurement board, procurement responsibilities, and how you sort of act as board members. So Kirby, if you could go ahead and go to our first slide, which I think is an outline. Uh-oh, I think it kicked off of the screen. Okay, great. So we have an outline here of all the topics we're going to cover. I'm primarily going to cover the introduction, Roman numeral 2, government procurement principles, the overview of the awards committee, and then I'll turn it over to Kirby to really handle the last three topics that are shown there: sunshine law, ethics law, and public records. So I'd be remiss if I didn't spend any time sort of giving an introduction with respect to the Office of General Counsel. A lot of times people don't really understand what the Office of General Counsel does. We have almost 40 lawyers in our office, over 40 lawyers. We may be close to 45 now. And we service all of the consolidated government. So that includes JEA, it's the other independent authorities, the mayor's office, the city council. So our plate is pretty full. JEA, as you know, you have a multitude of lawyers that are working for you, not only in the transactional side, but also in the litigation side. And so I've been here with the city for about 13 years, Lasikia Hodges. I came from Foley & Lardner doing real estate law, came over here to the city, was a designated real estate attorney, and now that's kind of morphed into doing everything that you can possibly imagine over the past 13 years. And I enjoy my job and I love working with clients like you. I do want to take a second to give my team members, I think David Maggette is on the call. Again, it's not often that we have you captive like this. So I'd like to give David Maggette some time to introduce himself, as well as Rhys Wilson, if he's on the call. Julie Davis, unfortunately, couldn't be with us. She had a death in the family, but I'd like to introduce those two team members if they're here.
Sure, this is David Maggette. I've been with the Office of General Counsel for about 8 or 9 months now. I've gotten to know most of you, or at least some of you, mainly through Zoom and the telephone, based on what's happened this year. But it's been a pleasure working with you thus far. I look forward to continue to work with you. I've been doing local government law for about 18 years. I have some experience with water and wastewater, both with the St. Johns County Utilities, and then also I worked for the City of Maryland, and we did some work with the Florida Keys Aqueduct Authority. I'm new to the electricity side, but always available if you guys call or send me an email, and I look forward to continue to work with each of you, each and every one of you. Thank you.
Rhys Wilson, are you out there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We see
Okay,
you.
great. My name is Rhys Wilson. I started with OGC about 3 weeks ago, so I'm one of the newbies here. My background is in commercial real estate. I practiced that for several years, representing developers and buyers and sellers of commercial real estate. I also spent about 5 years at Fidelity National Title Group and got very well versed in real estate and title matters there. Prior to that, I worked in a non-lawyer role as a financial analyst for 2 publicly traded construction materials companies that were in Jacksonville. I've been working with JEA for about 3 weeks now and really enjoying it, enjoying the people, and I'm glad to be here and look forward to working with you guys again in the future. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Rhys, and we're glad to have you. I'd like to, Kirby, if you could do a quick introduction. You're here representing the ethics office, but if you could just tell the team members, the procurement board, that's the role that ethics serve, I think that'll be outstanding.
Great. Thank you, Lasikia. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kirby Oberdorfer, and I am the Deputy Director of the Ethics Office for the city. I've worked with the city's ethics office for a little over 5 years now, and I was a prior member and former chair of the Jacksonville Ethics Commission for about 4.5 years. So what our office does is we help to assist city officials and employees with compliance with the local and state ethics laws, and we do that through a variety of 4 different functions. The first one that we do a significant amount of work in is we give advice. We give advice to a myriad of city officials, employees, board members about their roles and the city government and how the ethics laws may apply to various situations and circumstances that they encounter. The second thing that we do a good portion of our office's work is training. So Ms. Miller, our ethics director, has been engaged in some JEA managerial training. The first session was earlier this week on Tuesday, but we train all the boards and commissions, the new employees, the departments in the city, and the elected officials and their staff. So those are 2 things. We also have compliance. We ensure that those that file financial disclosures and gift disclosures for the city comply with that and comply with those deadlines, and we help them to meet that. And lastly, we serve as staff for the Ethics Commission, where we help to look into matters that are raised before the commission and introduce any legislation that might be needed for changes to the ethics code.
Awesome. And one of the things that Kirby didn't mention that I think, you should know, that not only do you have lawyers that are very versed, David and I are board certified in city, county, and local government, but we work with Chris Anderson. We work with the state a lot. So when she gets to her presentation, there are Florida statutes that apply to each of you, either as a board member, a public officer, or as an employee. And we work with Chris Anderson. He's the counsel to the State Ethics Commission. We were just on the phone with Pat Gleason, who works in the Attorney General's office, regarding the executive order for the governor and trying to make sure that we were going to be in compliance had that order expired and not been extended last night. So we have some really good relationships, and oftentimes we'll debate various issues in-house, so to speak, so within OGC and within the city's ethics office, but we don't hesitate ever to reach out to those higher levels to make sure that you're protected and you're covered, and we're giving you good advice. So we're going to move into Roman numeral 2, government procurement principles. Quick housekeeping. If we go throughout this presentation, and if any of you have comments, there will be an interactive portion to this presentation. So you'll certainly have a chance to give us your thoughts and answer hopefully some questions. You all will be graded on this. Whoever gets the most correct answers, you will receive a nice pat on the back. So look forward to that. So government procurement principles, I want to tee this up because I think it's very important before we get to the Sunshine Law, the ethics, and the public records. I think it's very important that the procurement board, so this is a conversation that I'm really having with the procurement board, the 5 procurement members, and anybody that may be able to serve as Kirby, anybody, your faces are great, anybody that may be able to serve as an alternate for a procurement board member. Procurement is all about the rules, really. I mean, that's all what procurement's about. And you have, when I say rules, you have various sets of rules that start at the highest level of the state statutes. The next set of rules would be your charter, okay? That functions as a state statute, is really equivalent to that, just more tailored to the city of Jacksonville and JEA. The next set of rules would be your procurement code and then your operational procedures, but there are various layers of rules that you have to follow. And so as a procurement board, that's really your main responsibility. So when we talk about government procurement, we're talking about the perception of fairness. We're actually talking about fairness. We're talking about the process and how you procure things, the openness of the competition, how many people are able to compete for any particular bid. The city of Jacksonville and other governmental agencies and JEA, there are vendors out there who would love to do work with a governmental entity, because in most instances, we're never going to be late, right? And so I think your business is an asset to the community. And I think government vendors that various contractors are dealing with, I think it's an asset, and you should think of it that way when you're going out for bids and you're going out for procurement. Someone would love to have a government agency to do business with a government agency. The last thing that we're always thinking about with respect to procurement is, of course, taxpayer dollars. We're thinking about the best price, the best value. And so these are all sort of principles that as you go to each of your procurement meetings every week, these various government procurement principles, openness, transparency, process, those are always the things that should be in the back of your mind when you're looking at any particular award that's going before the JEA Awards Committee. So I want to take some time now and move into that Roman numeral 3, just to highlight the JEA Awards Committee's roles and responsibilities, more specifically as it's laid out in your procurement code. So I think we all know that your chief executive officer, so your board has delegated to the chief executive officer pursuant to 2-101 of your procurement code, the ability to promulgate rules. So anytime the procurement code needs to be amended, that's something that your CEO is going to have the authority to be able to do. And so when you're having, conversations, Jenny sitting as your procurement chief, anytime we have these discussions on procurement and, you see that administratively something maybe needs to be tweaked, well, these are all takeaways that every time we're going to meetings, your chief of procurement would be able to work behind the scenes with the CEO and try to make changes. In fact, as many of you know, one of the RFPs that's currently out on the street is to come in and bring a vendor to help you look through your procurement code, your manual, and see if we can update it and get it on par with best government practices. So 2-404, these are the duties of the awards committee. And if you don't have a copy of the procurement code, I would certainly get that, and I would always have it handy. Because as you can see, I've highlighted really the main role as board members. So it says the duties of the awards committee shall, and this is this first highlighted section, review each award item presented for, and here are the buzzwords, compliance with the code, okay? And it shall consider whether the proposed action on the item is in the best interest of JEA. So the best interest of JEA, really from a procurement perspective, also from a business perspective, but primarily from a procurement perspective, because you already have business units that are making those good business decisions for the agency. So really your main role pursuant to the procurement code is to make sure that the item is in compliance with the code. And so when we say in compliance with the code, what we're talking about is, are we following the rules, right? So if it's a ITN that comes before an invitation to negotiate versus an invitation to bid, there are sections in your procurement code that will tell you how the process has to be if you're putting out an advertisement for a service that's traveling under one of those procurement methods. And so that's really your whole role. Again, business units, they're the business folks. They're making good decisions, business decisions for the agency. You're at the point in your review where the only question is it in compliance with the code? So you get a single source award, emergency, you're going to be flipping to these rules and you're going to be making sure that it's in compliance with the code. So many of the questions that you're asking is not only, is it a good business decision, but really more importantly is Chief of Procurement, business unit, procurement team, have we followed the rules that are set forth? And the reason why that's important to follow the rules is because if we don't, you end up wasting time and resources because it sets up a challenge for that particular item. You could have a bid protest. Some of the members that are here, I think Wayne for sure sat as a PAB board member. And that's, serious business. You're sitting in an appellate level hat if you're sitting on the appeals board. And basically it's a challenge to something that the procurement officer or the procurement board has done. So that's why you want to make sure you're always following the rules. And then Kirby, if you can scroll down just a little bit to the second highlighted part, I wanted to just point out that your CEO is relying on you as a board, because any recommendation that this board makes goes to your CEO and your CEO will sign off on that. And so I think your CEO is relying on you as a board to make sure and ensure that the rules are being followed and that the item is in compliance with the code. And then the last section that I've highlighted is section 9.2.2. This is in your JEA operational procedures. It says the awards committee members shall review all requests to ensure that each has the proper endorsements. So by endorsements, we're talking about you have a non-voting budget member, right, that's sitting on your procurement committee. So we want to always make sure, budget is in compliance. You have an OGC representative. I'm your OGC representative that attends all the meetings. So certainly I'm there to answer any questions that you have. But again, it all relates back to your main role is to make sure that every item complies with the requirements of the code and the requirements of the operational procedures. So I would encourage you to certainly peruse those documents and get familiar with them, particularly when it comes to some of the procurement methods that JEA procurement uses quite often, the ITN procurement method, the invitation to bid, single source awards, emergency awards, the standards committees. We've had quite a few discussions about standards. That's all a part of making sure it's in compliance with the code and in compliance with the operational procedures. So I hope this really in a nutshell is what your job is, your jurisdiction as a procurement committee. And so now that you have this, if nobody has any questions and you have the background as to why you are here. Okay, let's see. We do have a question. And so let me read this aloud. This is from Wallette. Should each member have an alternate when they cannot attend? If so, what are the qualifications of the alternate? So good question. And it's interesting, the way that Wallette, the procurement code reads, you could have anywhere from 3 to 5 members. But Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, as CEO, has designated 5 sure procurement members. And in the past, I don't believe there's been a rigid sort of alternate that's designated, right? I think it just happens. I know I've seen it in the past. If one particular SLT member can't make it to the committee, then they do that designation. I'll tell you, I'd prefer, and Wallette, you'll know where I'm coming from. I'm sorry. Did somebody, Jenny, were you responding?
I wasn't. Keep going.
Okay.
Keep going.
Yeah, so Wallette, what I would prefer for sake of sunshine, and you'll see this when Kirby gets into her sunshine discussion, we like fixed numbers. I mean, if the alternate is constantly alternating and it's different people, every single time, I think that makes it a little bit harder and a little bit problematic to determine who you can and who you can't talk to. And there is sunshine law guidance on that when it comes to alternate members. But right now, there actually isn't any qualification for the alternate other than the chief executive officer is appointing the members. And everybody, it looks like everybody has to be vice presidents, general managers, or chief officers, which right now I think almost all of you are the interim serving SLT members. Okay,
so I'll just jump in real quick, Lasikia. So I think it's a good question, Willetta, and something really they've run any committee member that needs to have an alternate. They let the chief procurement officer know ahead of time so that we know who's going to be a part of the meeting that week. One of the procedures, and pardon me for not knowing which one off the top of my head, but either I think it's the PICO operational procedures states that they should get their alternates approved by the chief procurement officer. And they're good about always letting me know, who's going to be attending in their place. And typically it is the same people over and over again. And it's usually at the director level. So still a high level from a review and compliance standpoint.
Okay, that's great. So thanks for that clarification, Jenny. Do any of the procurement board members have any questions about any of this? And I think as I was talking, I think Lynn has actually sent you out the link to the procurement code, so you have that. I would also, if you don't have it, get a copy of the operational procedures as well. Because as Jenny just said, some of the rules you may not find in the procurement code, that they would be in your operational procedures. And that's the authority that Jenny has as chief of procurement to promulgate additional rules to bring that clarity to questions like who picks the alternate and what's the process in determining who the alternate is. So the operational procedures are another key document for you to make sure you're in compliance with. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Kirby. So this is really the reason why we were meeting, for Sunshine Ethics and Public Records. And so don't hesitate, like Willetta just did, to chat any questions, or if you want to raise your hand. I don't know if Landon's still available and he can maybe cue us if somebody's hand is raised, but feel free to ask questions as we go along.
Thank you, Lasikia. Just to confirm, can you all see the PowerPoint? I just want to make sure you're seeing what I'm seeing. Yes, okay, great.
Yes.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time to attend and participate in today's ethics training. And yes, I did say participate. I just wanted to warn you that at times this session will be interactive, so you can't hide. I am Kirby Oberdorfer, and I am the Deputy Director of the Ethics Office. I've worked with the city in the Ethics Office for the last 5+ years. And I came to work in the Ethics Office as a result of my lifelong passion that I've had for ethics since elementary school. So if you're thinking, wow, that's really weird, what kind of lady is this? That I would agree with sounds kind of weird. I did not know it in elementary school that I had a passion for ethics, but I was a safety patrol. So if any of you were safety patrols or ambassadors and helped to steer people in the right direction and say, don't run, and Lasikia, of course, nobody's surprised Lasikia was a safety patrol. But if any of you had that experience, then you didn't know it, but you were little ethics officers, right? You were trying to keep everybody safe and keep them doing the right thing. But as I look over the course of my career and what led me into the office, there's definitely kind of a theme and a direct correlation about being a safety patrol in elementary school and working in the ethics office. And that correlation is that our role is designed to keep everyone safe, to keep city officials and employees like you safe, and to make sure that you're aware of the dangers of the various laws that are out there for you. Before we start the training, I'd like to know a little bit about you. If you please can in the chat, tell me the number of years you've either worked at JEA or you've worked in government. I'm trying to get a sense of how familiar you may be with the ethics laws. Oh, 30 years. Wow. 10, 15, 6, 5, 17, 9. Safety patrols rock. Thanks, Willette. Yeah, you guys, you're into longevity. That's fantastic. And that's a huge testament. 12 in government and 1 at JEA, 20 plus years. You guys make me feel like I'm a baby, a newbie for sure. So I appreciate it. It looks like a lot of you have had long-standing governmental service, some of you less so with the 2 years and the 3 years. But you may have had some interaction, but you may also have not really encountered some of these things. So I'm going to go over them as if you're new to government. And if you have any questions about them, please feel free to talk in the chat and we will address them. And you may recall from your elementary school days that you may have had some problems, at least I did, of always following the safety patrol rules. You might say, like, why can't I run in the hallway? And there's a reason for that. So the research shows that people have a difficult time following rules and procedures if they don't understand the purpose of them. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start with the purpose of government ethics first, very briefly, and then we're going to get into the number of issues you might be likely to encounter in your employment or in JEA or service on the awards committee. So we're going to start with a brief exercise. And I'm going to go through a couple of scenarios for you, and I want you to put your taxpayer hat on and think that when I go through these scenarios, I want you to envision that you've read these in the paper. And I want to know, how do you feel as a taxpayer about this government employee's behavior? Is it 1, okay, no problems? Is it 2, you're not sure or you have no opinion? Or 3, does it seem unfair or wrong? So the first one I want to share with you is a city employee is charging citizens an extra $5 for an extra copy of a permit, and the city employee is personally keeping that extra $5, and cumulatively all the money from the permits equate to about 10% of that city employee's salary. In other words, they're gaining an extra 10% of their salary. So tell me what you think about it. I'm seeing a lot of 3s. Okay, seems unfair or wrong. Very good. Excellent. Thank you for participating. And we're going to get into that in just a little bit. Here's a second scenario for you. How would you feel if a department head at the city asked a city employees on city time and with city equipment to clear debris from her yard following a major hurricane? So you 1, 2, or 3? Lots of 3s. You guys might be able to teach this class. So you definitely have your right hat on. I appreciate that. And sorry, I don't work in ITD for a reason, so I might be prone to skip slides and have to go back. But these scenarios may seem crazy, and maybe they don't to you, but they actually happened here in Duval County, the one with selling the certificates. I don't know if you're surprised, but that was a judge in the family law court in the 1960s. He was personally selling extra copies of marriage certificates to constituents, and he was profiting an extra 10% of his salary off of that. And they asked him, it's a quote here on the right, they asked him if he saw anything wrong or questionable about it. And he said, you can be assured if I saw anything wrong with it, I would not be doing this, and my employees wouldn't be doing it either. But yet you all were astute to know that something didn't seem right. It didn't seem fair that he should be personally benefiting from his job. And these scenarios, although seem crazy, they're not limited to Duval County. They're certainly not even limited to the state of Florida. We've seen them play out all over the country. And they have one thing in common. They have many things in common, but the primary thing that they involve is people, right? People in government positions. And so that leads us to human nature. So what is it about our human nature? How can our society protect our human nature to put our personal interests above our government positions? And the way that we've tried to do that is by enacting ethics laws that serve for openness and transparency and fairness, and that try through the ethics laws to protect us as citizens and taxpayers from putting our own personal interests as employees above our government position. So that is essentially what the purpose of the ethics laws are. And like Lasikia said, for the procurement laws, openness and transparency, all of those things and fairness underlie the ethics laws as well. And we know that you all are really good people and you want to do the right thing. But the reason we're here to educate you today about the government ethics laws is so you can succeed as a JEA employee and as an award committee member, if you're one of those, to protect yourself when you might come in to encounter some situations, because the right situations in government ethics is not always the same as our personal ethics. And sometimes it's counterintuitive and it's not obvious. So government ethics and personal ethics are a little bit like apples and oranges, the diagram you see here. So personal ethics are the things that we were taught in church or school or by our family, how to get along with others, essentially the golden rule, treat others as you want to be treated. Government ethics is very different. It is narrowly focused on preventing public corruption by putting in safeguards to prevent employees and officials from personally benefiting from their government position. So it's about fairness and it's about integrity and independence of the institution itself. And sometimes choices by personal ethics are not the same as government ethics. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. If you had a relative that recently perhaps unfortunately lost their job because of COVID, the pandemic, and they're the sole breadwinner for their family and they had some young children at home to take care of, they might expect you to help them get a job at JEA. And that would be, for most people, a good personal ethical thing to do. But if you do that and you're in a position of hiring authority, you might run in trouble with the nepotism laws for the state. So that's one thing. The second thing is, for those that are on the awards committee, it's a personally ethical thing to do to want to prepare for meetings and to bounce ideas off of each other so that you've done your due diligence in advance of the meeting and you don't get into a meeting and it looks like you're unprepared. But if you're on the committee together and you're discussing items that could come before you, you could get in trouble with the Sunshine Law. So the government ethics are definitely sometimes counterintuitive to our personal nature and what we were taught as personal ethics, and sometimes our instincts are not the right thing. Okay, so now we're going to transition into the government ethics danger areas. And as we go through these, we're going to have a series of scenarios for each of the different areas we're going to cover. Some of the areas I'm going to start with a scenario just to get your ideas and thoughts about what you think might be the answer to certain things. And then we'll go through the law and end with another post scenario. And then some will start with the law and just the scenario. It just depends on each of them. But as you go through each of the scenarios, we wanted to give you this ethical decision-making guide. And there are 3 things we'd like you to consider. First, ask yourself, is something legal? Does it violate state law or city ordinances? And if you're definitely not sure, you should ask your department ethics officer at JEA, that's Wallette, she's on here with us, or ask OGC, Lasikia, or David, or Julia Davis, or you can even call me in the ethics office. The second thing you should ask yourself is, even if it's legal, does it comply with JEA policy? Is there something in JEA policy that prohibits it? And lastly, even though it's illegal, or even though it is legal and might comply with JEA policy, is this going to look bad? In other words, is this going to something that's going to end up in the Times Union or a blog somewhere where someone's criticizing you or JEA about what's being done? So the first area we wanted to cover is Sunshine Law. And this applies primarily to the awards committee members. And we'll get into why. It typically does not apply to employees and their general day-to-day staff duties unless they're making they're having some type of decision-making authority, like scoring proposals or making solicitations and scoring them and those kind of things. But this is a hot area. And so, I want to kind of probe your brain and your thoughts before we get started on the law of this. And if some of you put in the chat, what is the purpose of the Sunshine Laws? What do you think they're designed to do? Transparency, good. Transparency. Yeah, you guys could totally teach us. That's right. So accountability, excellent. That's exactly right. So the ethics laws, particularly the Sunshine Law, is all about openness, transparency, and accountability of government officials to their citizenry. That's exactly right. And it is the Florida Sunshine Law is the broadest transparency law that there are in the nation and even in the world. So we're going to start with a scenario again to kind of get us thinking about this. JEA recently put out a bid for an interior design for the new headquarters. You're a member of the awards committee and the chair invites you to lunch to get your thought on the bidders. Can you go to lunch? And if you can go to lunch, what topics can you or not discuss? So let me know what you think in the chat. No, can't go. No, no, can't discuss bid. Can't discuss bid. Good. Oh, sorry. I was trying to go up in the chat and somebody had a really good one I skipped over. Pardon me. Can't go. Yes, you can go to lunch, but not to discuss the award items. Good job, Jordan. That's exactly right. Like, so the Sunshine Law doesn't necessarily prohibit you from going to lunch, but you certainly can't discuss the award items or any of the bidders and all of those things. And for those that said no, that's okay too. You might be holding yourself to a higher standard saying, you know what, I don't want to get myself in a situation like that. Even if I go, it might be awkward to go and say, no, I'm not going to talk to you about those bidders. Stop, taking me to lunch. Some people don't even want to put themselves in a circumstance like that, and that's okay too. So no would be a good answer as well. All right, so you guys are definitely on it. So let's talk about what the Sunshine Law is. The Sunshine Law encompasses any communication between 2 or more members of the same board, and so that's the award committee members, the 5 of you, on a matter that could possibly come before the awards committee. All of that communication about any matter that could come before the awards committee has to be in a noticed meeting and able to be heard by the public. And this is a lot of information, and I'm going to try and briefly go through some of these, the different variables. So note the broad use of communication. So it's not just limited to meetings, right? You can't have any meeting communications outside of meetings. And it also applies gavel to gavel. So in other words, you can't be discussing any committee business on your way into an award committee meeting before the meeting has officially begun, or after it's gavelled over and you're walking out. And that's a very common, that's a human nature thing. That is counterintuitive. That is where the government ethics laws and Sunshine run counterintuitive to our own personal nature and communication. It's very human, very natural to want to talk about things that are coming up or things that have already happened. But you can't do that about your committee business if you're not sitting in the part of the meeting that's gavelled in and the public can hear. No sidebar conversations during the committee meetings, because that could also raise issues. And note that the other important thing that I wanted to highlight here for you is the 3rd bullet point, any matter that could possibly come before your awards committee. So it doesn't actually have to be on your agenda for that meeting. It doesn't even have to be something you've ever taken up. It just has to be in the broad range of your duties that Lasikia shared with you earlier about what the committee is authorized to do under the procurement code. And note that the Sunshine Law applies to all your meetings. It applies to committees and subcommittees. It applies to workshops, and it applies to 2 or more people in a planning meeting. It's not just the main meeting of the awards committee. If you did have subcommittees, it would apply there too. There was a situation that occurred at City Council a little while back where there was a subcommittee of a board and they were not taking minutes at their subcommittee meetings. That would be an issue under the Sunshine Law. So just make sure that you know that if you have subcommittees or workshops, you need to be noticing them and taking minutes as well. So here's the part of the communication. Right, that's right. Dan put something in here about shade meetings and cybersecurity. Those are exemptions to the Sunshine Law. So that's right. You wouldn't have to have the public there. I appreciate you sharing that. This is definitely a little more general, broad scope. So the activities and communications prohibited by the Sunshine Law include phone, email, texting, or other communication like social media with your committee members about anything that could come before you. It also prohibits taking tours of a place. So if you wanted to go look at a prospective site of something, some court opinions say you can't do that under the Sunshine Law because the public doesn't have the opportunity to be present for it and to be heard. And it absolutely prohibits using a liaison or a staff as a go-between to share information. In other words, since you can't directly communicate with your committee members, you can't use someone else to pass along information to them like the telephone game and do indirectly what you're prohibited from doing directly. So that might come up like, oh, tell me how Tommy's feeling about this matter. Well, I can't tell you how Tommy's feeling about this matter. You got to get into a notice meeting with Tommy if he's on the awards committee with you. So how do you know if you might be violating the Sunshine Law? Here's a good clue. If you walk into a meeting and you know exactly what's going to happen and how all the votes are going to fall out, ask yourself, how do you know that? How did you come into that information? On the other hand, if you have no idea what's going to happen and everything goes totally, smooth or not, but you could not predict what was going to happen, then you probably are not in a sunshine area. And this is especially true where might be an issue of great public importance or controversy. There have been some instances in the city boards and commissions in the past where there have been some controversial issues and the matter comes up on the agenda. There is no discussion on it. The board or commission votes on it automatically, and then they're done. That will always, yes. And thank you, Joe. This includes JEA board member participation at the ratings agency presentations. That's right. Sunshine Law doesn't allow the JEA board members to travel together to the bond rating agency. One person can go, but two can't go to those because it's something that's definitely coming before them. And so just know that if you have an issue of great public importance, you should be having a discussion on it in the meeting so the public has the right to hear about your decision-making process. So now we're going to test your knowledge again with a scenario. You're on Facebook and see that a fellow awards committee member has posted a great idea for a project JEA is bidding out. You like the idea. Can you give it a thumbs up or comment on it? Okay, great. I'm getting lots of no's. So you guys are definitely on it. That's exactly right. And I bring this up for two reasons. Number one, social media is a really hot topic in Sunshine Law right now. And there's a lot of controversy over it. There was a big article written in the Miami Herald last year titled, "When Public Officials Fight on Facebook, Are They Breaking the Law?" And that was about two city of Miami Beach commissioners that were having a dialogue on Facebook following one of their meetings. So the commission had considered a sign ordinance restrictions, and they did not pass the ordinance and putting any restrictions. So Commissioner A went onto Facebook complaining that there were that's right, shouldn't have posted the idea. That's a great tip. The commissioner went on Facebook lamenting that there were no restrictions put in, and she was complaining about what happened at the meeting. Commissioner B, that had been in the meeting, saw Commissioner A's post and responded, "Well, that's because you rejected my idea," and starts a dialogue with her. So there were complaints about Sunshine Law violations. And Commissioner B said, "Well, I didn't violate the Sunshine Law because I only talked about what was said in the public meeting." It doesn't matter because they're having a dialogue outside the public meeting. So the public can't hear that dialogue. So that could be a sunshine issue. And number two, he said, "Well, we had already voted on it." Again, that doesn't matter because that's an issue. The sign could have come back up. Somebody else could have introduced some legislation about it at the following meeting or 6 months down the road. It's definitely an area that the commission could have heard about, even though they already voted on it. So just know, and most people don't think about an emoji or a thumbs up as being a form of communication or a thumbs down, but it is. And all it takes is one little thing to trigger it, but it sounds like you guys are right on it and you're aware of that. So that's good. Okay, so what are the requirements of the Sunshine Law? That your meetings be open and accessible to the public, that you properly notify the public in advance of your meetings, best practices 7 business days before, if you can, or 7 days prior. Take written minutes and always include the opportunity for public comment before you vote on things, and preferably right before that vote if you can. Just note that being open and accessible means you have to have your meetings in a location with reasonable access to the public or on a virtual platform that the public can do for free. You can't have it in a location that discriminates against a portion of the citizenry or has burdensome security procedures. They can't be required to ask permission to enter the meeting room. And also it has to be accessible to members with disabilities. Can a recording of the meeting replace the meeting minutes? That's a great question, Joe. And the answer is no. So there is no requirement under the Sunshine Law to record your meetings unless you have something specific in a state statute that applies to that particular board or duty that you have, or it's something maybe in your own procurement code. But typically the Sunshine Law does not require a recording, but you are permitted to do more than what's required. But the Attorney General has clearly stated that if you do record your meetings, they do not replace your meeting minutes. You still have to have meeting minutes of it, or a transcript, a verbatim transcript of what happened there. So we talked about this already, but just as a reminder, you need to have public comment before you take specific actions on issues. And also allow it before a controversial issue if you can, and then to have we recommend a general comment period for them as well. I'm going to quickly go through. Yes. Okay. So great question. This is a public records question. If you do record your meetings, are you required to retain them as a public record? And the answer is yes, because it relates to your JEA business, the public business. So that's a great question. And so I'm going to quickly in the next 2 slides go over the requirements for virtual meetings. And the reason why is because the governor has issued yesterday or today an executive order allowing committees at the local government level to meet virtually through November 1st. So we get a month's reprieve to kind of transition back into meeting requirements with in-person quorums. So for right now, local government boards can meet virtually and not have to have an in-quorum person. If you do that, make sure there's no cost to the public. Make sure that you have an audio or video recording of the meeting and you put it on the website in case people couldn't attend the meeting. And then prior to the meeting, you post on your website materials that were going to be discussed at the meeting, like an agenda or presentation or packet or whatever it might be. Also, you want to make sure you take steps to help the public understand what the proceedings will be and what's taking place virtually. So each speaker should identify themselves by name before speaking and voting, so observers can figure out what's going on. Each motion should be clearly stated and each vote tally clearly announced. Any documents being discussed should be readily identified. And of course, you have to have an opportunity for public comment virtually.
Hey, Kirby.
Yes.
Great. I have a few comments I want to touch on before you move from Sunshine. So this is your last slide.
Yep.
Whenever it's appropriate, just toss it over to me.
Okay. I have just a couple more. So what activities or communications are allowed under the sunshine? If you have something you want, you're on the awards committee and you have something you want your fellow members to see, you can send them information or articles in advance of your meeting. And the best practice way to do that to protect yourself is to have a staff member, somebody that's not on the awards committee, send that to all the members, because they're not communicating. And if somebody inadvertently replies back or gives a thumbs up and gives a communication in response, they're not communicating with a fellow member. They're communicating with the staff member, which is allowed. You can talk about any business that's not related to the awards committee, like any topics not related, like the weather or sports or whatever it might be, with your awards committee members all day long. That's why you could go to lunch with your member, but not discuss the bidders. And you can also talk about your board business with anyone not on the awards committee, like other employees at JEA or any people in the city at different agencies or anything like that. So here is a scenario for you. The awards committee is voting on a controversial contract proposal and a member requests to vote by secret ballot. Can you vote by secret ballot? So if you'll let us know in the chat if you can vote by secret ballot. No, 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 good, no. You guys you should be teaching this course. You guys are so well versed. This is so great to see. No, no, no. This question comes up a lot, particularly like in elections and some things where people aren't comfortable. But yes, that's correct. The sunshine does not allow secret ballots. Awesome. Lysikia, you had something?
Yes, thanks, Kirby. Just a few things that I want to clarify. I really just highlight because I think it's particular to this board, and I don't know if you mentioned this or not. So one, that you have non-voting members on this board. So this is, I'm talking to the board members here. Jenny is a non-voting member. Your budget person is a non-voting member. So sometimes in the past, there's been some confusion about if the member doesn't vote, then that means they're not subject to the sunshine. You're all subject to the sunshine. That's why OGC was very successful in getting removed from the committee, because we were actually some time ago a non-voting member of the committee, and that posed a problem because you can't talk. We couldn't talk to you. We couldn't talk to the members. We couldn't talk to Jenny. And so just keep that in mind, that it applies to the non-voting members as well. The other thing I want to mention really quick is that you always have your public officer hat on. So when the gavel, closes, the meeting adjourns and Jenny adjourns the meeting, you are still walking around in a dual role. You're public officer and you're also SLT member. And I mention this because we know that JEA has directors meetings, every, Thursday, 8 o'clock. I can't remember whatever time Jody said. but it's very easy for you to have multiple SLT members at any given time in a meeting. And so I just want to remind you that if you're getting into a conversation that, as Kirby said, could possibly come before your board for action, then that's something that you shouldn't be talking about, even though we recognize that, you know, as SLT members, you will be together in multiple instances for various contexts. And then the last question, I received a text from somebody on the call, and I want to clarify with respect to the shade meeting rules. Shade meetings are exempt by the law, but it just depends on the type of shade meeting that you're having. So I'll say, anytime any one of you is trying to coordinate a shade meeting, work with our office, because you have litigation shade meetings. They have their own set of rules. You have the cybersecurity shade meetings, different set of rules on the Florida statutes. You also have employment law shade meetings, and they forever stay in the shade, you know. So just make sure when you're doing the shade meetings, there are nuances to each type depending on what they are. And so just get with our office so that we can make sure you're dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So shade meeting, Arthur has just chatted the question. So this is a meeting, so we talk about sunshine, literally the term sunshine. If you can imagine sunlight that's being, you know, shown on any meeting where everybody can see, as Kirby was saying. The shade is when you're out of the sun. That means you don't have to be in the sun so that everybody can see what you're doing. And the law allows that under certain circumstances. So Arthur, for example, when there are negotiations going on with respect to collective bargaining agreements, meeting with the management, meeting with the board, there are exceptions in the law that say you don't have to do that in the public, because if you did, it would hurt you in that particular instance. So that makes sense. And same thing with cybersecurity. It's the policy behind it. If we had to meet in the sunshine and tell everybody our plans and where everything is, that would clearly be a detriment and it would hurt the agency. And so that's why the law allows for certain exceptions to the sunshine. Okay. I don't think I see any more chat questions. All right. Thanks, Kirby.
Awesome. Thank you. And just to pick up on Lasikia's point about the non-voting member being bound by the Sunshine Law, the purpose and reason behind that is because that person has an opportunity to influence the decision-making of the committee. So the public has the right to hear what that person has to say and how they're influencing the decision-making. So that's the reason, but that's a great point. All right, next we're going to move into our second danger area of gifts. We're going to skip over that other scenario because we've already covered it. Scenario number 2, and we're going to start this off because I want to get an idea of what you think about something. Your friend since kindergarten has recently submitted a bid to JEA. He sees you and your spouse at Ruth's Chris and offers to pay for your birthday dinner. Can he pick up your tab? Oh no! I want
you guys are like, we're not going to get this question wrong.
No,
we're like at 100%
no. Yeah. Okay, excellent. So as I'm trying to scroll through the chat, I end up, of course, inadvertently. Great, you guys are totally on this, and I love Brian's response. No, good. That's right. The answer is no. Why? Because they're a vendor of the JEA, or they've submitted a bid. They're a potential vendor, and they could violate the gift law. That actually happened in real life. We saw this play out in 2018 in the gubernatorial election here in Florida with Andrew Gillum. He had a college friend of his for over a decade that happened to be a lobbyist. He happened to be a lobbyist in Tallahassee, and he went on a trip. Andrew Gillum went on a trip with his lobbyist and with his brother, and he got some Hamilton tickets from his brother that actually came from the lobbyist. And Andrew Gillum, you'll see in the quote here, said it never occurred to him that some of the gifts was from a lobbyist, and he wasn't supposed to accept the gifts because he had been friends with these people for so long. So that does happen. When you have lifelong relationships with people, we have a tendency to view them outside of our government lens, and it can lead you to a danger area. So, but you guys are on it. I appreciate it. So that's great. All right. So the gift law says you cannot accept gifts from anyone doing business or lobbying with the JEA that are over $100 in value at one time, one gift, or $250 in a year. Accumulation of gifts cannot be more than $250 in a year. So if you get, 4 lunches or dinners for $75 each, that could be a prohibition of the $250 accumulation. Be aware that even a gift is under the monetary restriction. It can definitely end up on the front page. And there's a difference between gifts to individuals and gifts to the JEA as the agency. Gifts that come into the JEA and are shared by everyone or handed out by your CEO or some members of the SLT get reported by Wallet as gifts to JEA. So for example, after one of the last hurricanes, Home Depot wanted to donate a bunch of grills to JFRD to thank them for their service during the hurricane. And they were kept at the station and used by the firefighters to cook dinners and meals when they were at the station. That obviously is a gift to JFRD, and it gets logged in the city. It's not a gift to the chief. He's not taking them home and having a backyard barbecue with his personal friends and family. So just know about that. If you get any gifts that come in that are meant for the agency, they do need to be reported. Okay, so here's a knowledge check for you. If you're offered tickets to a Jags game, including access to a private suite, name one question. I have three, but we're running a little short on time. So name one question you should ask yourself before, you should ask of yourself or the giver before you accept it. So in other words, if somebody's offering you tickets to a Jags game and a private suite, what's a question that comes to your mind that you need to be thinking of? Is it over $100? Excellent. What's the value of it? Are these face values? What's the value of the ticket? Yes, absolutely. That's going to be a critical. Is it sold out? Good. What is the monetary value? Good. Would this cause a conflict of interest? Excellent, David. I appreciate that. Very good. Excellent. Is this person vending or doing business? Are you being offered solely because of my position at JEA? That's a great thing. Or are you connected to the business of JEA? You guys are awesome. Who are they playing? Nice, Jordan. I appreciate that. I know. How would this be perceived by the public? That's a great question, Arthur. So you guys hit on some of the major questions you need to be asking yourself. What is the value? Will I be influenced by this? Are they expecting something from me? Is the giver a lobbyist or a vendor? Will it look bad in the paper? Where is it really coming from? How is it going to be perceived? So that's excellent. All right, here's another quick scenario for you. An IT vendor of JEA invites you to attend an IT conference in Jacksonville. They give you a 2-day pass to go. The speakers at the conference are top-notch, great. It's going to help you do your job better. Can you go? And how do you handle it? So if you'll share with us in the chat. What is the value? Good. Is it free to everyone? Good. Great question, Lori. All right. So consult with the ethics office. Perfect, Wayne. That's exactly right. Can you just pay for it? Great. That's a great response. Depends on value. Should probably pay yourself. Great. That's a great response, Christine. So this gets into a little bit of a tricky area that we want to make sure you're aware of. If anybody outside of JEA is paying for you to travel or attend a business conference, you have to have it cleared in advance in writing by the ethics office and the office of general counsel. And the reason we have that requirement, and you see the citation down there, it's in our local ordinance code, chapter 106. And the reason we have that requirement is because we're trying to protect you from any gift issue or a conflict of interest issue. That's exactly right. It could raise potentially both of those. So if you know that somebody wants to offer you to go and it's going to help you at JEA, you just need to get it approved by us in advance. And it could be that it can be done as a gift to JEA. So in other words, the vendor could make the gift directly to JEA and JEA gets to decide who goes to that conference. That's one of the legal ways to do it, but you just want to make sure it's done in advance and with approval of the ethics office and the office of general counsel to protect yourself. And make sure you ask in advance. We did have a situation where an agency employee asked me the Friday before a Monday conference if she could go. And as she's at the conference, I'm researching, and it turned out it was a vendor that had paid for her to go, and the vendor paid directly to the conference organizer to the hotel. That's a gift to that person. That's an illegal gift to that person, and it raises issues. So make sure you're following this procedure and you ask in advance. All right, next danger area is asking for things. Note that you should not be asking or soliciting for anything of value from someone for you, your family, your business associates. We did have an issue one time in the ethics office where there was a city official that asked a lobbyist for tickets to a premier sporting event for the official's mother because it was sold out. And that's going to lead you into definitely a danger area. So please don't do that. Next is disclosing confidential information. Do not share any confidential information, particularly about bids and bidders and things like that. And you guys seem to know that. And don't use JEA resources for the personal benefit of you and others. We did have an issue one time in the ethics office where there was a city employee that posted confidential information about a constituent on Facebook. And the reason the employee posted it was the constituent was the current girlfriend of the employee's ex-boyfriend. So it was just kind of a love triangle thing. And this employee was really upset that she was broken up with for the constituent. And so she posted confidential information about her that she got through her city position on social media. So yeah, don't do that. Okay, so now I have a scenario for you all, and this is kind of a long one. JEA is getting ready to put a job out to bid, and your sister's company would be perfect for the job. Her company does great work, and this is in their wheelhouse. However, because she's your sister, you decide to avoid any conflict of interest and not mention it to her at all. While the two of you are out, though, she casually asks what you believe the lowest bid would be and if you could recommend her for the job. She also wants you to get her a copy of the bid specs. Yes or no, or how would you handle it? Share whatever you're feeling in the chat. Can you do this? Can you share this information? Absolutely not, in all caps. Good job, Christine. Yikes. Okay, I love that response. Wonderful. Okay, so you guys are very attuned to this. No, Joe, that's perfect. No, 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 Carl, that's fantastic. Yeah, you know, never, right, that's right, Rachel, that's fantastic. Or Rochelle, I'm sorry, I mispronounced your name. No, refer her to JEA.com. That's exactly right. She can't get any other information or process that any other bidder is not going to get. So wonderful. You guys are right on it. Okay, so this one's probably going to be just as good for you too. This is the next area we're going to talk about is misuse the position, and we're going to start with a scenario to kind of test your knowledge here. If you're running late for an awards committee meeting and got pulled over by a police officer, would it be okay to tell the officer you're on JEA business and in a hurry? No, no, no. Yep. Oh, disown her. That's your sister. Okay. No, 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 no. Okay, great. Not okay. Nope. You for sure get a ticket. That's right. This could be perceived, great comment, Christine. This could be perceived as asking for something special. That's exactly right. A misuse of position, trying to get a special government benefit for you or benefit for you personally because you work for a government entity. And the reason this is in here is because this actually has happened. It happened here in the city, and it also happened with an Atlantic Beach city commissioner out at the beaches who had a number of traffic stops. And unfortunately for that official, some of them were by the same officer. And he would start every traffic stop with these magic words down here. Do you know who I am? I'm Commissioner so-and-so. So the officer actually filed a complaint against that commissioner with the State Ethics Commission, asserting that the commissioner was misusing his position to get out of the traffic stops tickets. And the State Ethics Commission found probable cause because he was using these magic words. So definitely you guys know that. Legally, you cannot use your public position for your personal gain or the gain of your friends, families, or business associates. Like the confidential information, follow the same process as every other citizen or, you know, everyone's got to be treated equally. And please avoid, do you know who I am? That's always going to raise questions and a misuse of position inquiry. So you guys are definitely on it. Additionally, we wanted to highlight for you some misuse of position restrictions in our local code here. You are not allowed to misuse city or JEA property for the personal benefit of you or others. You can't use employees' time for anything other than official JEA business. You can't misuse JEA resources for campaigning, including property, employee time, computers, internet, you know, advocating for anyone that's running or anything like that. And this probably won't apply to you, but just in case it does, if you're on the awards committee, you can't represent somebody before that committee. That's gonna, unless it's yourself or your spouse or your child, that would cause a problem for you. But just know you can't be involved in matters before your own board. Okay, here's a scenario at the end to test your knowledge. You chair a nonprofit board and the nonprofit is hosting a festival to raise money. You frequently work with the head of Parks and Rec for the city, and you want to call him to ask if your nonprofit can borrow bleachers and a stage for your event. Can you do that? Can you give Daryl Joseph a call and say, can I borrow this? Jenny says no. Anybody else want to chime in? So like many of the scenarios we have here included in the PowerPoint in this training today, this actually happened. And a lot of them do. And the answer is no, right? That's a misuse of your, you have to get permits and you have to go through the formal procedure and you can rent them from the city, but you can't just jump the lines and call in a favor from Daryl. So good job. Thank you, Jenny. All right. The next danger area we'd like to share with you is conflicts of interest. And this can get really tricky and really complicated. And so this is going to be a high level review. And all we're trying to do is just kind of generally explain how the different types of conflicts arise. There's 2 of them and what to do about them. So first, I want you to kind of hone in on this little cartoon here. This says Calford General Store. So of course, Jacksonville used to be known as Calford, and it's like a little town store. And the reason that I include this is because Jacksonville is a very small town and a large landmass city, right? I mean, there are about 2 degrees of separation between everybody. And as a quick story to kind of illustrate this, I lost my wedding ring and I thought I had misplaced it out at UNF when I was there for a banquet. So I called down to the UNF police department to see if somebody had turned it into lost and found. And lo and behold, the officer that answered the phone was a former student of my mother-in-law when she taught at Terry Parker High School. And so she starts talking about my husband's family. I mean, that was not what I was expecting when I was calling to see if she had my ring, but there are lots of connections between people in Jacksonville and they all know each other. So if you have conflicts, please don't freak out. You may likely have them, particularly if you've been in Jacksonville a really long time. It's not that you have them, it's how you deal with them that's important. And there are 2 different types of conflicts under the state ethics laws. There's a voting conflict, and we call that a little conflict because you can cure that conflict by abstaining from the vote, by declaring your conflict on a form and abstaining from the vote, and that's it. You don't have to get off the awards committee or anything like that. The other type of conflict under state law is bigger conflicts, prohibitive conflicts. You would either have to end your private interest that somehow is intersecting with JEA, or you couldn't be on the awards committee for it, or you might have to end your JEA employment. So it's really important to kind of illustrate those for you. And this is what generally prohibitive conflicts kind of boil down to at the state level. The state says that you and your family may not do business with JEA or any part of the city. That's a big piece. Note that it's not just limited to JEA, it's any of the city departments, it's any of the other independent authorities, JTA, JAA. It's also any of the elected constitutional officers like the sheriff and the tax collector and the supervisor of elections. It encompasses all of the broader parts of the consolidated city of Jacksonville. There are some exceptions. So as you have this encounter, if you encounter an issue like this, we do encourage you to reach out to the ethics office. Also, state ethics laws say that you may not have an employment or contractual relationship with a company that's doing business with JEA. So you want to make sure that you don't have one of those. That's why we have secondary employment policies in place, is to screen for these things to ensure, to protect you from a potential conflict of interest. And sometimes it is allowed. So if you need to know about something, please contact the ethics and OGC and we'll be sure to look into it. And it may not be the answer that you think it is. Sometimes you think it's prohibited and it turns out there's an exemption and it's allowed, or sometimes it looks okay and you dig into the details and it turns out, no, it's not going to be okay. So you want to make sure that you contact either OGC or ethics office. So here's a scenario for you. JEA is getting ready to buy some supplies for an upcoming project and your family owns a business that's selling supplies. The business is willing to give JEA a discount it cannot get anywhere else. Can your family's business sell to JEA? I know you guys are going to hit this one out of the park like you have the rest of them. So what do you think? Can your family's business sell those supplies to JEA? No, it's a conflict. No, 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 no. Excellent. No, no, no. That's an interesting question, Carl. I'm going to get with you on that offline. I just saw that, so I'm sorry. I didn't see that before for the misuse. No, you have to disclose your relationship to the business. It's a conflict. No. Okay. Still no. Excellent. Okay. So generally, state law is going to say you can't do this, right? Because you or your family business is trying to sell to JEA. There are exceptions. So make sure that you contact OGC and ethics office. So for instance, if your family was the lowest bid and a competitive sealed bid, and it can't be an RFP or anything like that, it's got to be a competitive sealed bid, but they were the lowest bidder, that's an exemption. If your family is the sole source of those supplies, that's an exemption and it could apply, but we need to work with you to get you clear through the State Ethics Commission. And we did that for a JSO officer who has a business that sells law enforcement equipment. He designed a special badge for off-duty officers to be recognized immediately when they walk up on a scene. It's a really bright colored badge holder, and he wanted to sell it to JSO. That would violate this, but we wrote into the State Ethics Commission for him and said he was the only source of supply of those badge holders. And the State Ethics Commission said, yes, he can sell to JSO those badge holders because he's the sole source of supply. So it was clear that he did it the right way and worked with the ethics office. Okay. Next scenario, you own a consulting business on the side outside of JEA, and you want to bid on a project managed by the city's public works department. Can you do this? In other words, can you bid on something unrelated to JEA? No. Very good. Excellent. Okay. Wow. Avoid the appearance of impropriety. That's good. So all of those are really great answers. And yet you're right that typically state law is going to prohibit you from doing that because it doesn't apply just to JEA. It's to other parts of the city. But there may be an exemption if you don't have a public ability to influence the contracting decisions of public works. So you want to get with OGC and ethics and talk to us about and get into the details and see if we can help protect you and see if we can get clearance for you to do that from the State Ethics Commission. Okay, next is a voting conflict, and this is really just for members of the awards committee. State law says that you cannot vote on any matter from which you, your family, or your business associates might economically benefit or lose. And note that it has to be something of an economic nature. It can't just be because it's controversial and you don't feel like voting on something or you want to kind of sledge off or anything. So we're going to test that on a scenario. Your awards committee is getting ready to vote on a bid submitted by a client for whom you perform outside of JEA part-time consulting work. Can you vote on that issue? So in other words, you have a consulting business on the side and one of your clients has bid on a project for JEA. Can you vote on that issue? Whoops. No, very good. Okay. Right. You cannot vote on that issue because that would be an economic benefit to your client and you're connected to your client. So very good. Okay, so here are some helpful hints on how to keep track of conflicts and to address them. We recommend you create a list of those with whom you have a connection, your spouse and children, your business associates and organizations, and particularly companies for which you serve on the board of directors. If you serve on the board of directors for any company with the JEA or the city, they get funding from the city, you need to contact the ethics office and OGC because that could be a conflict, and that's something that is people don't readily recognize. Okay, so our last major area of
hey Kirby, and just really quick to the board members, if you do have a voting conflict, there's paperwork that you have to fill out. So again, if you think you have a voting conflict, much better to get with our office or ethics in advance so that we can walk you through it. And if we determine that you do have one, there's necessary paperwork that you need to fill out by state law.
Right,
okay?
right. And we'll help you do that. All right, so our last substantive area we want to cover with you is public records. And we're going to start with a scenario to test your knowledge. You're working for JEA on a project that was recently received some attention from the press. A citizen calls you and requests all of your information on the project. Should you give them the information? Should have, okay. Go through public records. Good. No, direct them to public records. Go through public records request. Excellent. Okay. So you all very astutely are on it and you know what to do with it. This is really important. There's obviously a legal obligation to turn over any records that are connected with your public business. So you know the right process, which is to get them into public records, and then they can be examined for exemptions or things that might need to be stripped from them for confidentiality purposes or that are exempt under state law. But generally, every document that's connected to your JEA business is to be preserved and made available for inspection and copying. The Constitution, the Florida Constitution, actually gives citizens that public right, and it's also put in the Florida statutes and the citation down there. Note that it's the content of the document that decides whether it's a public record and not the location. So if it's anything that deals with your JEA business, even if it's on your personal laptop or personal phone or whatever it is, it's going to be a public record if it relates at all to your JEA business. So you want to make sure you're preserving every document created or received in relation to your business. Also, if you do have that scenario where the citizen contacts you or somebody contacts you, don't ask them who they are and why they want it. You can't do that. That would run afoul of the public records law. And also, you already know this, but to follow JEA's policy on how to respond, which is to get them over to your public records situation. And be very careful that if you do have any JEA business on your personal device, that you back that up somehow, or you get it into your city email or your city server or your JEA email or your JEA server. Because as we know, things can happen to personal devices. And there was a case over on the East Coast where the general counsel of a city had some documents on his personal phone and a boat trailer fell on his phone and he couldn't retrieve them. And he was found in violation himself of the Public Records Act because he hadn't backed them up and they could no longer be obtained. And the city also was found in violation of it. So just be careful if you have them in personal email to get them, or your text to get them into JEA system somehow, so you know that they're protected and they're backed up. Okay. You get an email on your personal email about your awards committee business. Is that a public record? Yes, 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 yes. Wonderful. Yes, perfect. You guys. Yep, excellent. And Rachel actually had a really good point, and that was be careful of how you respond to a request. You should say, don't say you must go to public records. You should offer to them either whether they go there directly or you can do it on behalf of them. You can ask them that. That's definitely the best practice for sure. You don't want to looking like you're not turning over a record. So for sure. Question about Lasikia. This is an interesting question. What about a request from another utility? That was a question in the chat. Do you have thoughts on that?
So I'm sorry, Kirby, I actually cannot see the question. So
the question was, what if you get a records request from another utility?
I don't think it matters the source of the request, right? So you could get this, I mean, the source can come from anywhere. It's just the fact that it's a public records request. And, you know, all of the responses, you guys have a great public records department. Most agencies don't even have as robust of a department as you guys have. So I think, you know, you send it to the proper folks in your agency that can handle these requests and determine if there are any sort of exemptions that might apply. You know what I mean? That's my response.
I agree with that. Awesome. All right, last scenario for you. I know you're probably exhausted and this has been a lot of information, but you guys have done a great job. I'm very thoroughly impressed with your knowledge of the ethics laws. All right, you take a lot of handwritten notes during your awards committee meetings. Do these notes need to be saved as public records? Let us know what you think in the chat. Good. If they were being done in conducting business, yes, 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 yes. Yep. Great. Notes are excluded. So Joe wrote a comment, and that's why I put this scenario in here. Notes are not always excluded. So if your personal notes are about your grocery list or everything you have to get done that day, and it doesn't at all relate to your JEA business, it's excluded for sure. If it's handwritten notes and you somehow share them with a committee member, or you refer back to them for some of the information at the next meeting or whatever it is, or you send them to somebody else, that is definitely a public record because it relates to your awards committee business and you're now sharing them with someone else. It's definitely a public record. There's definitely a gray area where you take your own personal notes and you don't share them with somebody, but note that it could be deemed to be a public record depending on if an action's filed, what the judge thinks, where he comes down. It's a very gray area. So just be cautious in taking personal notes about your JEA business and make sure you preserve them because it could be a gray area. You have anything else, Lasiki, on that?
Yeah, I mean, only that, keep in mind, most things are public records. So in this bigger sort of broad sort of umbrella of what's a public record, probably like 80% of the things that you deal with are public records, right? And then you have the exemptions, which are very narrowly construed. They're narrowly tailored. We are not allowed to interpret any public records exemptions by adding more language into the codes. If the legislature left it out of the category of exemptions, then that means you can't rely on it. So just, keep that in mind. And this subject also comes up with confidentiality agreements, because we do have AG opinions, attorney general opinions, where you have agencies that attempt to contract privacy through confidentiality agreements. So there isn't an exemption that's clearly spelled out in Florida statutes. And so then they enter into a contract to kind of create this privacy element and exemption. And the AG, of course, has discouraged that, heavily discourages the use of confidentiality agreements.
Okay, wonderful. So lastly, we just wanted to share with you the danger area and not asking questions. So if you have questions, we encourage you to talk to Willette. She's your JEA ethics officer. Here's her information and how you can contact her and her lovely picture. I love working with Willette. She's fantastic. She knows exactly the right questions to ask, and she's incredibly responsive. So I definitely encourage you to work with her. We work closely together on almost a daily basis. And then also, if you're not sure if it violates the law or you want some clarification about anything we've discussed today, you can contact the Office of General Counsel. Here's Lasikia's number and Julie Davis's number. Somebody had asked if these slides would be made available for reference. So the answer is yes, I will definitely send them to Jenny to send out so you don't have to scribble down all this information. And lastly, you can contact us in the Office of Ethics, Compliance, and Oversight. You can call Carla, the director, or me, the deputy director, and there's my phone number and our helpline. But we wanted to make sure that we left some time for questions for you. So if you have any questions, please feel free to share them in the chat.
Right, and let me take 30 seconds of that because there were a few questions that were sent to me that I want to get to. And I also want to go back to the contacts. I didn't mention yours truly, Jody Brooks, of course. Jody Brooks is your assigned chief legal officer. And the way we've set this up, I mean, I'm the deputy general counsel. Jody works hand in hand with me. And we have our procurement team members. We sent out an email, I think it was last Friday, where we're now moving to this new system where you have an attorney that's assigned to each procurement category manager. So we're really excited about that because I think this new structure is going to help streamline a lot of the work that we do, and it recognizes the limited resources that we have on our end. So if it's a procurement question, an ethics question, I would stick to your procurement folks. Again, SLT members, you deal with Jody Brooks all the time. So that's not an issue. Reach out to her. But if it's more procurement related, I think you'll probably get a quicker response if you reach out to your procurement lawyers. That would be me, Julie Davis, Rhys Wilson, and David Miggett. So I had two questions that were really related, and it was a sunshine law question. Very good questions, because I think I might have scared you guys when I said, hey, you have these directors meetings and you're meeting all the time, and so be careful what you talk about. So I want to give you some comfort, and that's why I started the presentation off with telling you what your role is. And so there are multiple places in your operational procedures. When you look up the definition of what an award means, it says an award is the written approval of the JEA Awards Committee that the formal procurement action was in accordance with the procurement code. I can give you two other sites in your operational procedures where you are to review the awards against the terms of the code and the terms of the operational procedures. So that's a very limited role, albeit very important role, but it's very limited. So there's a lot of other things, as you all know, that goes into the development of an RFP. You got to figure out what your minimum qualifications are. You got to figure out what the scope is. You've got to figure out what your evaluation criteria is. All of that goes towards the development of your RFP. You can absolutely talk about that all day long. You will talk about that. As an SLT member, you're going to work with other employees in your business unit, and you're going to develop and put together the scope of that work. I think the issue that you want to be more concerned about is when it's ripe for some sort of award action. And by the time we get to an award action, we're talking about a specific vendor that we have in mind. So obviously, you know, Stephen can't have a conversation with Steve Tootin about, yeah, I like this bidder much better than the other bidder, because that's the quintessential action that you're taking as an awards committee member. So, you know, think of it as awards committee, keep that role as narrow as possible. It's making sure that whatever that item is coming before you, it's in compliance with your rules, and that's it. But I think if you are a business unit person and you're generally, you know, just kind of talking about, as Brian Roach sent me the question about, you know, is it a good idea for us to maybe go out to bid for this project or that project? I think that's totally allowed. Okay, so hopefully that clears that question up. And then let's see, I don't know if we have any more questions in the chat. Kirby, did you catch in our last few minutes here? Not sure I saw anything. Maybe somebody can raise their hand and we can allow them to speak. Well, maybe, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just quickly scrolling through. Should a public data request specify that it's a public records request? In other words, do they have to use those terminology? And they don't.
Right.
There's no magic words they have to use.
Right. Very good question.
That is a great question.
Okay. So, you know, it's a lot of information. As Kirby said, we don't expect you at all to memorize this information. We really expect you to have some idea of as procurement board members, what your role is when you're looking at these awards, how you interface with each other on the Sunshine Law, and then the gifts and the ethics issues that Kirby went through that applies to you as board members as well as employees. And Steve Tootin, going back to your original question, the ethics, the scenarios, the Sunshine Law scenarios, if you were talking about another JEA Sunshine Committee, your governance committee, or your JEA board committee, those Sunshine rules are going to apply to those members the same way they would apply to any board, just like we're talking about the application to your procurement board.
Right. And can I jump in there for a second? So if you have, let's say, I'll make up names. If you have John that's on the governance committee, and you have Steve that's on the awards committee, but neither one of them are in cross committees, the Sunshine Law does not apply to them because they're not sitting on the same committees in JEA. So just to know that it's only members of your board or committee that you're sitting on.
Right. Okay, so Jenny, I guess we'll toss it back over to you for any sort of closing comments, or maybe if you have questions. But we're finished.
No, I want to thank both of you and Kirby. You are a great presenter, and this, I'm sure you do this often, but this was very thorough. Lasiki, as always, thank you. You guys do a great job, you know, continuing to educate and keep everybody in line and within the guidelines. So I just want to thank everybody for their time. And if there aren't any other questions, then we can close out the workshop. All right, well, we appreciate it. Just as a reminder, so there is another for the management team, and I think you guys saw this from Paul. As a reminder, there is an ethics training for management that's still outside of this, needs to happen. So check in Oracle for some of those dates to see what's available if you haven't already signed up for that, but this is outside of that meeting, and just want to make sure everybody was aligned with that. And I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you all. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hey, Lasikia, hold on.
Oh, right. Thank you so much. You're such a pro at this stuff.
Oh, thank
I
you.
feel so bad. I set you up for these meetings. I set up the dates and times, and I'm like, hey, Kirby, can you do this one with me?
Yeah.
And then you take over and you do a magnificent job as always.
Oh, well, thank you so